You're listening to The Leadership Enigma, powered by Transform Performance International, a podcast for the insatiably curious to explore the power of human-centered leadership to create real momentum for positive and sustainable change. Whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, or corporate executive, each week we speak to global experts, academics, rising stars, ambitious upstarts, and disruptors as we discover that success leaves clues. Now, here's your host, Adam Pacifico.
So welcome to another episode of The Leadership Enigma, and I have really been looking forward to this one. Now, this episode is called Control the Controllables, and I have a question I want to pose to our listeners. How does someone with terminal brain cancer get through a full Ironman, or indeed a number of full Ironmans? And in order to answer that question, I'm delighted that I've got Richard Wright with me. Richard, welcome, and thank you for joining The Leadership Enigma.
Adam, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege for me. And I've also been looking forward to this one and delighted to be chatting to you. So thank you so much.
So Richard, just before we go into your incredibly powerful story, just tell the listeners what it is that you're doing at the moment. So you kind of three or four key bullet points that I think that sum up who you are and what you're doing right now.
So I am a professional speaker. That's what I do full time. But I call myself a transformative storyteller. All I really do is tell my story. And it's something I'm extremely passionate about. And that's my purpose. I've just written a book called The Power of Purpose. And then I'm trying to keep on doing events, endurance triathlons, and some mountain bike events. And that's pretty much me in a nutshell, apart from the fact that I'm a very passionate father of two girls.
Which is brilliant. And we're looking at each other at a moment on video as we do this particular podcast, and I can see what the listeners can't, and that is some wonderful Ironman awards, I think, just above your head on the shelf there. So I think there's at least 3 or 4 that I'm looking at.
So that's back in my heyday. Ironman was something I used to be really good at. I have come 16th overall. That's my best position as an amateur athlete, competing against professional athletes, won my age group a number of times, qualified for world champs. It was something I was really, really good at, and something that I had to let go of when I got cancer the first time. And that was quite a struggle for me, letting go of everything I was and trying to navigate the space of who am I now?
Well, I think that really is a lovely segue into what is a deeply personal and inspiring story that really has led us to this podcast. So can I ask you, to give us an outline of that journey, that challenge, which was for many the ultimate challenge, but tell us about that.
So I was diagnosed with a tiny tumor on my pituitary gland many years ago. In fact, we were trying to fall pregnant, my ex-wife and myself, with our first daughter. And it was benign at that point in time. And for 12 years, I was able to control it, medicate it, and it would shrink and then kind of go away and then would come back again, back into medication. Yep. And at that time, so 4 years ago, a little bit longer than that, actually, the end of 2015, found out that it had grown substantially. And that's the first time that my name and cancer appeared in the same sentence. Right. But it was an instant, not me. There's no ways. Absolutely no ways. I can't have cancer. And I think I was so determined that I'd entered Ironman South Africa, and I was so determined I was going to go and complete that event. And I think more than anything else, it was to try and prove to myself that if I can do that, if I can get to the finish line of an Ironman, I definitely don't have brain cancer.
Do you think there was a defense mechanism piece there, Richard?
For sure. Yeah. That is definitely a big theme in my life. When things are tough in myself, I'm just going to go and beat my body up on the road somewhere, and it's going to make me feel better, and I'm going to somehow get to the other side and think, well, there we go. I'm bulletproof. So, but in this instance, I wasn't bulletproof. I managed to get to the finish line of that event, and 5 days later, I had to go in for a lumbar puncture. The only way to determine brain cancer, you can't determine it through a blood test because of the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, right.
And at that point in time, I found out that I had cancer. And I'd already done the unthinkable, the stupid thing, in that I'd Googled. That's what we do. As soon as we get some symptoms.
Never Google an illness.
Exactly. And the worst case scenario, I mean, you could have some intermittent pain in your elbow and headaches from time to time. And you put that in and Google says death.
Yes,
That's what it is.
Dr. Google's diagnosis.
Yes. So I had, unfortunately, and the news wasn't good. It was like, if you have got this form of cancer, say your goodbyes, because you're not going to be around. And nobody survives this thing. It's that rare and that aggressive. And again, it was that doubt of, surely not. And I went in, literally, we rushed the results through. And the doctor had said, if it is this cancer, we're taking this out straight away. And I waited in the rooms for 3 or 4 hours. And the results came back, and I went straight to theatre. And
wow!
And when I came out, all I wanted to know from the doctor was, did you get it all? Did you get rid of this thing in my head?
Yes.
It was transfernodal surgery, which is non-invasive surgery. They drill up through your nose. And so the news, it was like, I'm pretty confident we got it all. So immediately it was, Richard, 1, cancer, none. And but then I had to have radiation 6 weeks later after the brain, the scarring had healed. And 2 weeks into the radiation, we did an MRI, and we found out at that point in time that the cancer had already spread, and spread to the underside of the brain, the 4th ventricle, and there was another lesion on the pituitary gland. And at that time, I was told I had 6 months to live.
Wow.
And that was rough. That was a really, really hard time. I think it's almost impossible not to become a victim at that point in time, no matter what your beliefs are, no matter how hardcore you think you are, no matter how much you believe that you will survive anything. At that point in time, it's kind of, wow, okay, this one's got me. And it was hard.
How do you shift though from the? How do you shift away from feeling like a victim? Because let's be honest, if you're given that news, you in that moment are a victim. Is that a fair comment? I don't know. I mean, guide me on this.
You absolutely are. So I think any of us can relate to something like that. That whenever your life is turned upside down, and we like to use the term disruption, and it's a good term. But when your life is disrupted to that extent, and everything that you know is turned upside down, it's very hard not to feel like you're a victim of whatever that thing was. Could be the circumstance, could be job loss, could be economy, could be an illness, it could be an accident, whatever it is. And at that moment, you are a legitimate victim. In fact, one of my favorite quotes, Naomi Judd, and she wrote that you can only ever be a victim once, thereafter you're a volunteer. And whilst I believe, it's an amazing quote. It's an amazing quote. But having said that, yes, you're a legitimate victim of cancer. And Richard, you've got 6 months. You're going to die from this. You can't suddenly think, well, okay, I'm a victim when I first got the news. Okay, legitimately. And now tomorrow, what? Am I not a victim anymore? Am I now a volunteer? But at some point in time, whether it takes you a couple of weeks, whether it takes you a month, whatever it is, at some point in time, that realization of, okay, hold on 2 seconds. I need to get over this feeling of being a victim. And for me, there are a number of events that helped me that first time. One of them was a long chat I had with a good friend of mine, and he's quite a stoic. And he was talking about Friedrich Nietzsche and the concept of amor fati, which is Latin for embrace your fate or love your fate. And
so embrace, say that again for me, Richard.
Embrace your fate or love your fate, amor fati. And Nietzsche went on to say, because it is in fact your life. And until you can embrace the stuff that you can't change, and now we're hitting on the title of this chat, Control the Controllables. When you can, how do you accept the things that you cannot change? And part of that is having to accept it, and not only accept it, this is my life. So embrace it, because until you can do that, you can't move on. But the problem, Adam, is that we spend so much time, whenever we have been disrupted by anything, we spend so much time on the obstacle, the things that are standing in the way, this adversity, whatever it is. And the more we focus on trying to overcome that, the more I focused on becoming a hashtag cancer warrior.
Right.
There isn't things I wouldn't try. There wasn't, I would do anything, and I mean, who wouldn't, to overcome this thing. But because I was trying so hard to fight the cancer, I became more of a victim of it. And I think that's what happens.
Right.
The more we focus on the thing that is standing in the way of where we see our lives and what we were and everything we've lost, we become more of a victim of it. And so that was a very, very important step in facing this massive disruption is that moment of, okay, hold on 2 seconds. I need to, cancer isn't my life. And I think from an identity point of view, when we are facing off something that's huge and it's disrupted our lives, it sometimes takes over our identity. And my life became all about cancer. So instead of Richard, who is a father, an athlete, and a professional speaker, and a bunch of other things, and he also has cancer, my life became cancer. And that moment was delivered to me. I'll never, ever forget this moment. And it's an amazing story. But it really was an incredibly poignant moment in my struggle with cancer. I picked up my 2 girls from aftercare. It was the last week of radiation, and I was really struggling. So after they found out that the cancer had spread, I had another 5 treatments lumped on. So it was 35 treatments, 7 weeks, continuous weeks of radiation.
Right.
And the problem is they're hitting the same spot in your brain over and over and over. And the swelling, it just gets more and more, and the headaches, but it can't go anywhere because, your skull. So it was excruciating. And I picked up the girls from aftercare, and my eldest, McKinnon, she was 10 at the time, said to me, "Daddy, I'm really sorry, but I've got this project, and it's due for tomorrow." And now, as a parent, you understand, and I know you've also got kids, that there's a problem with that sentence, Adam. The homework is the stuff that's due for tomorrow. Projects are the stuff that's due for, sometime in the future.
Yeah.
She was very apologetic and said, "Daddy, I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, what is it?" So she said, "Well, we have to put the solar system together. You have to go to a craft shop and we get these polystyrene balls, and they're all different sizes. And then we have to measure them all out like the planets, and we have to paint them like the different planets. And then we hand it in." I'm like, "Tomorrow?" She says, "Yes." Like, oh. So, I think it's that project where, and I'm sure you relate, it's at 10, it's not the project you allow your kid to do on their own. With any major results, they can, some artistic direction is probably all that you give them.
No, definitely no power tools.
No, not at all. So I'm thinking, wow, and I think it's that project where you painstakingly put it all together and you do the research and you get quite proud of yourself. And as they get out of the car in the morning, you drop them off at school, you gingerly hand in the project and say, be careful with that. It's a masterpiece. And then when you pick them up after school, you don't ask them, "How was your day, love? And who did you play with? And did you eat all your lunch?" It was, what did I get for the project?
Yeah, gold, silver, or bronze.
Exactly. It's one of those. And then you completely, dejected and frustrated and disappointed and dismayed when you find out that she gets 18 out of 20. It's like, did anybody in the class get more than that? Who are they? Anyway, it's that project.
That's good. That's the competitive side of you coming out now, Richard.
No, I'm not competitive at all. So off we go. And I'm slumped over the steering wheel at a major intersection waiting for the traffic light to change. And I'm really battling. And this little voice pops up behind me from the back seat. And she says, "Daddy, are you okay?" And I said to her, "Sure, Bug, I'm really battling. But let's just go and get this thing done. When I get home, I just need to lie down and sleep for a bit. But I'm okay." And again, the silence. And then the little voice piped up and she said to me, "Daddy, nobody said it would be easy." And I whirled round. Where did that come from? Where did you hear that? You never heard that from me. Did your mom tell you that? Who told you that? And she got defensive and she said, "Dad, I'm really sorry, but I don't know what else to say."
Wow.
And Adam, I still don't know to this day, where that actually came from. But all I do know is that it's exactly what I needed. It was the kick in my pants from my 10-year-old daughter saying, "Dad, if you keep on focusing on this thing, if you keep on thinking the way you're thinking, carrying on going forward, I don't know where you're going to land up."
Yeah.
And I guess that's it. It was that a lot of people ask me that question. How do I carry on when I feel that my life has been that disrupted, or I feel beaten, or I feel that I can't find, my options are limited, or I don't quite know how to move forward. And
so Richard, Richard, it sounds as if it's okay to feel like and be the victim for a period of time when you hear such traumatic news. That's okay, but it also sounds from your story that you've got to get out of that phase as well. And it maybe took your 10-year-old daughter in the back, the voice of great wisdom in a 10-year-old, to almost snap you out of that phase.
For sure. And I agree with you. So For sure. None of us, we're all human, and part of being human is being fallible, and part of being human is the emotional roller coaster, the feeling brain versus the thinking brain.
Yeah.
But at some point in time, there comes a time where you've actually, and it's hard. You've got to make that cognitive decision. And I think, what it is for me is when the level of discomfort gets that high, and we all desire change. We all it doesn't matter what that is, we desire change. And so often we hear the same people saying, I really want to lose weight, and I really don't, I hate myself, I hate my body right now. And you kind of think, okay, and then a couple of months later, you're having the same conversation. And I think the question you really want to ask that person is, at what point does the level of discomfort have to be that high that you're actually going to do something about this?
Right.
And I think that's what it is for me, I wallow. So just to very quickly, and there's so much more we can talk about than the cancer journey, but I went into remission, and 6 months later, cancer came back. Almost a year later, we went into remission, and then the cancer came back. And every time it was harder to have to deal with, because it survived this.
Another knockback.
Wow, it was hard. And each time I spent a substantial amount of time, in one instance, almost 2 weeks, wallowing, where I didn't leave my bedroom, my bathroom, and my kitchen. That was that little triangle. And I cut myself off from people. I couldn't face anybody. And I just needed to, I was sucked into my own vortex of negativity. But that's sometimes
natural and necessary, maybe, Richard.
It's necessary. It's completely necessary. But at some point in time, you've got to make that cognitive decision and choice that this behavior isn't serving me, and if I want to become the disruptor, out of this place of disruption, what are the things I can control, and how can I change my situation going forward?
How did you snap out of that 2 week period then? What is it that you did, how did you manage to navigate through it?
So for me, my go-to place, as we alluded to in the beginning, is the exercise. That's the one place where I feel if I can do this, I think we do hard things because it enables us to do harder things.
Right.
And I kind of felt if I could put on some running shoes and literally just walk around the block in my neighborhood, I was doing something. And in that way, I was overcoming the thoughts in my head, and I was doing something that was going to serve me. So it very definitely is that. So I'm a firm believer that our thoughts determine our perception determines our reality, and our reality determines our behavior. And right. I think we work so hard at trying to change behaviors and trying to change our actions, and we often fail. And the reason we fail is because we are changing our actions and behavior with the same thinking that we came in with. But when we change the thinking, then the actions actually and behaviors come naturally. That changes on its own. So how can you change the thinking? And for me, it was after that chat, the first time with my 10-year-old, I entered an ironman. I thought that if I can do this thing, if I'm going to beat cancer, I need to go to my place of power. Where I need to reclaim my power. Where's that place for me?
This is put you back in control in some ways, didn't it, Richard?
That's exactly what it did. What can I control? And I think years and years and years of being an endurance athlete, focusing on, and I've primarily trained on my own. I'm not a big fan of training in big groups. Right. I like to train on my own. It's my thinking time, it's my alone time, but it's also my time of being able to control. So no matter how bad things get, I'm really good at being able to control my head and my mind, and push forward. And there are a couple of things that I do there.
There's some self-discipline in there, Richard.
There's a lot of that. And that's really what that place is. And and I know we've heard it said over and over that the hardest step is the first step out of the door. If you want to go and run, you want to go and cycle, whatever, change your life, go to the gym, whatever it is, the hardest step is the door, the one out the door. And it's overcoming that mental struggle and the mental battle. And if you can do that, that's the thing for me. I know I'm going to beat the thing in my head by using the thing in my head. That was intuitive to me. So it literally was. It was entering an Ironman and thinking, well, the finite thinking, the box of finite thinking I was put into with this disruption was the labels of cancer, the brain cancer, what I read on Google, what the doctors were telling me, the survival rate, the treatment. Those are all very finite things of what you can, what you can't do, what is going to happen to you. And all of those things were what other people were telling me about what my story was going to look like. And taking control back was saying, but hold on 2 seconds, whether that's true or isn't true, that's in the future. It's not now. And how can I control my now? Well, I need to test the limits of that. And how do I do that? Well, I just need to get out there. And I need to look at something different in my future. I need to be able to project myself going forward into not a box in the ground, or a little urn somewhere, but a finish line of something. And if I can go and do an Ironman with stage 4 brain cancer, I can beat brain cancer. That's what that thinking was for me.
And when you talk about the now, what is the now at the moment for you?
In what sense, Adam?
So, you talked about the battle and the challenge that you've had. So as we're talking today, the condition, what is the condition now? As in beaten, sorted?
So beaten, sorted. And interesting thing, so last year was a really, really rough year. And there was experimental trial chemotherapy drug from Israel that 6 love out the park in my body. It was just nailed me to the ground.
Right.
Eventually stopped that. And I developed a brain bleed, and I had seizures, and the chemo really messed up my lungs to the point that I was battling from a breathing point of view. I had a bronchoscopy because they were worried that the cancer had spread. It was a really rough year. And I only managed to enter one race. It was a half Ironman.
Only one?
Only one.
People are listening to this thinking, what do you mean you only did one?
But wait, there's more. I did this race with no training. No training. And here's the thing.
Hang on, before you just help everyone understand what an Ironman consists of. Because let's just put Ironman, no training. What does it consist of? Let's just deal with that.
Okay, so I know you work in miles. I can't help you there, but in kilometers, and a full Ironman is a 3.8 kilometer swim.
Yep.
It's a 180 kilometer cycle, and it's a 42.2 kilometer run. It's a full marathon, and a half Ironman is exactly half of that. So it's a 1.9 kilometer swim. It's a 90 kilometer cycle, and it's a 21. It's a half marathon run
with no training and having to deal with all of this treatment that you outlined.
Correct.
Okay.
So now I had fear. I had big fears. And my obstacles, as I saw them last year, June, were, number 1, I've got brain cancer. Number 2, I've got some pulmonary issues. I'm battling with breathing. Number 3, I've done no training. And number 4, there's been the issue of a brain bleed and some seizures. So for the first time, I was really, really worried about just getting to the finish line. And the thing with Ironman, and this is so true with everything in our lives, whether you think you've got 17 hours to do a full Ironman in. So it's a lot of time to do that stuff in.
17 hours.
But you see what you did there. Immediately your brain's thinking, that's like a full day, right? Wow, that's a long time. So whether you think you can do it or whether you think you can't do it, you're 100% correct. And what stops more people from doing an Ironman is the idea of this thing that is so big.
Right.
But here's the thing. There's very few people that don't make the cutoff. Very few. Because you've got ample time to do it in. There's a cutoff after the swim and there's a cutoff. You've got a certain time. But you've actually got enough time to do this thing in. You can swim it pretty slowly and still finish. You can do the cycle at about 22.5 kilometers per hour, which is really pedestrian. But you're going to have to do that for 180 kilometers. Right. And then it's like, but I've got to run a marathon. No, nobody said you had to run it. The rules are quite clear. You can run, you can walk, you can crawl, but just keep moving forward. You've actually got enough time to walk the entire marathon without running a single step, and you will still make the finish line. But
I've got to ask a question, Richard. I've got to ask you, what's been your best time then for that extraordinary sequence of events?
A 9:16.
9:16, okay.
9:16. So it's, but the winners come in at around about 8:10, 8:15. So, and then there's quite a big, the sort of top 20, and then there's a bit of then they get staggered like any race. There's a bit of a gap. And it depends on the course. There's some courses that are quite hard. So one of the races that I entered throughout this journey was Ironman Wales. It's in Tenby. And
I know it. I know Tenby.
It's spectacularly beautiful. That was one of the reasons I wanted to go there. It's also billed as one of the races with the best supporters, and it wasn't a letdown. But it's one of the 2 hardest Ironman races on the planet.
Okay.
Because it's so hilly. And the year I went there was apocalyptic conditions. It was gale force winds and rain the entire time. It was that sideways rain that when you squint in your eyes, it somehow still gets in there and stings you like a little needle pin.
Right. Good old Wales.
Good old Wales. It was horrific. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And with cancer. But I kind of figured if I could do that, if I can do that, I can beat cancer again. Anyway, back to last year. So I'm standing on the start line and I've legitimate fear of all of these things. And here's the interesting thing, Adam. The minute the starter gun goes off, and whether it's an exam, whether it's a tennis match, it doesn't matter what it is, this thing that there's build up to this event. As soon as you start the event, all of those feelings, the anxiety, the tension, the stress, it goes out of the window. Because all you're concentrating on doing is the actions of what you need to do now to get to whatever this finish line is.
Controlling the controllables.
There we go. And that's the important thing. So here I am in the water and I had a great swim. And I'm lucky, I've done a lot of swimming in my life. I was a swim coach for a long time too. So it's the easy part for me. And I was loving the conditions. It's quite tropical in Durban, South Africa. The water is quite warm, the Indian Ocean. And about 100 meters from the beach, the exit, I sort of looked behind me to breathe. And I felt that the water was pulling me back. And I'm like, what is this? It's like a wave. And the conditions were quite good. But I looked behind me, and the next minute, this massive wave is sucking me back. And I thought, I'm going to get dumped. I'm going to get dumped by this wave. So immediately I pushed my arm forward and I kicked like hell to try and move forward and think I might be able to surf this wave out. That's spectacular. And that's not how that story ended. Essentially what happened, I landed up my shoulder. This excruciating pain as the water took my arm and threw my body over and planted my face as I saw the sand coming. Planted my face in there. My goggles smashed against my nose, blood coming out of my nose, my lip was cut, my goggles were gone, and my shoulder was dislocated.
Wow.
And I came out of the water, and then the medics came to help me, and there was a medical vehicle on the beach and came to have a look at me, and the doctor says, well, it's a dislocated shoulder, I think, but we need to look. We're going to have to take your wetsuit off. And I was like, I'll die in my wetsuit. It's so tight, and this pain was so excruciating. I couldn't imagine them getting this wetsuit off. And in struggling to get it off, and I couldn't use my arm, and I'm pulling back on my hand to try and get some resistance so the doctor can pull the wetsuit off. Then it pops back in. I'm like, oh my goodness, wow.
It's fixed.
And it's fixed. And then the nurse comes along and she says, no, you need to do some debridement on your nose. There's some stitches. And I'm like, no, just painkillers. Just give me some painkillers. And the doctor says, no. At that point in time, one of the officials came along and took a picture of me on their phone and said, we're going to DNF you. Did not finish. We're going to DNF you. You're not finished. Right. And I was like, no, hold on. Can't we just, fix this? Anyway, long story short, I managed to get back into the race. That wouldn't give me any painkillers. And somehow I managed to finish the race. And about a month afterwards, this thing still wasn't healing, and I was still worried about the shoulder. And I finally went in to go and see a surgeon. And he said, listen, I'm 99% sure you're okay, but because you're a swimmer, let's just do an x-ray. Yep. And the results came back, and he started laughing. He's like, there must be something wrong with you, because this isn't a dislocated shoulder. It's a broken shoulder. It looks like somebody, the head of your humerus is a ping pong ball, and somebody's put their thumb in it. The top is gone. So here's the interesting thing out of it. Number one, when you want something badly enough, and it's that important to you, you will get through anything. So, and I'm no different to anybody. And you might say, Richard, you're a bit nuts. And I really am not. Finishing that race meant that much to me, showing my 2 little girls that their dad was going to be okay. He was going to be able to survive cancer. If I can do this, girls, I'm going to be fine.
Yeah.
That was that important. Getting to that finish line for myself was that important. And then secondly, an obstacle really is the thing that you see when you take your eyes off the goal. The minute so there's that cancer. When you focus on cancer, you're going to get more of that. That's the law of attraction. It's whatever we think, we will attract more of.
Just say that again, Richard. I lost the sound. Just say, when you focus on cancer, go from that point. Because that was a lovely point. But go from there, my friend.
the law of attraction states that whatever you think, you're going to attract more of. And when you're focusing on cancer, you're going to get more of that. You're going to get more of that negativity. And when you're focusing on the obstacles, you can't see the goal. So for me, the finish line is that. And just now I want to come back to that, because I think that can help a lot of people in terms of how do I become the disruptor. And then, but the last point I want to make about that, and again, it's one of my favorite quotes, and it's attributed to Mark Twain. Whether it's true or not, I'm not entirely sure. And the speculation is that he said, I've suffered some terrible things in my life, some of which have actually happened.
Yes.
Whether he said it or not, I couldn't really care. I just really dig it. So let's think about that. All those fears, all those obstacles at the beginning of the race, the brain cancer, the pulmonary issues, the lack of training. Do you think that I thought of any of those things during that race? No, I didn't. So much of what we worry about is looking into the future and things that you can't control that stuff at all. And the more you think about that, the more you become a victim of it. All you can really focus on and all you can really control are the things that are within your control.
Richard, sorry, go on, finish what you were saying, sorry.
So for me, people say to me quite often, how on earth did you manage to get through a full Ironman or half Ironman with brain cancer or with a broken shoulder? And it's an easy one to answer. I got through a number of full Ironman events exactly the same way that anybody else in that race got through them. One swim stroke in front of the other, one pedal stroke in front of the other, and one footstep in front of the other. There were no special rules for the cancer guy. There was no shortened route for the cancer guy, no extended time for the cancer guy. And that's, I think that's what we try and do is we look at everybody else and we compare ourselves to everybody else.
Yeah.
And as soon as it's something different, well, how can I compare myself to other people? Every journey is an individual and unique journey. And if you want to become a disruptor of anything, the only thing you can control is yourself. It's leadership of self.
Yes.
You only become a leader by leading yourself. And the only way you lead yourself is to lead yourself in your thinking, choosing those thoughts. And for me, it's that important. Then in a race, I break it down. So this journey called life is too long for us to look at finish lines that are too far. Have an idea of where you want to go, for sure. That's 17 hours, the Ironman finish. But if I think of the finish line, when I'm standing on the beach before I even get going, mind blown. It's just too big.
Yeah.
I've got to break this race down to, I've just got to get to the first buoy in the water. It's
chunking it down, isn't it? This is chunking something down.
Exactly. And how do I get there? I control my thinking. What does that look like? Well, I can't control the other swimmers. I can't control the other athletes. I can't control the water temperature. I can't control the currents. I can't control the weather. I can't control the route. I can't control whether I'm going to get a puncture on my bike. I'm going to have a mechanical. I can't control that stuff. I can't control what's going to happen to my body. The only thing I can control is my thinking. And my thinking is push forward, glide, pull under the water, breathe. Are my feet up in the water? Are my hands equidistant? Am I sighting? Am I swimming straight? And then when the chips are down and there's always going to be pain and suffering, second half of the marathon is it gets dark. And at that point in time, I don't even want to count down the kilometers, because the minute I'm focusing on, okay, I'm on kilometer 17 out of 42, then again, I'm just making this thing harder than it should be. I've become a disruptor by disrupting my own thinking. And that is, I actually say a mantra to myself. I'm strong, feeling good, strong, powerful, strong, feeling good. And I say it under my breath. So if you watch a video of me in an Ironman, it looks like I'm speaking to myself, and this guy must be a little bit loopy. And I am speaking to myself, because our brains are only capable of holding one thought. We can't multitask. We're fast switching between different thoughts, but we're not multitasking.
Right.
And we can only hold one thought. And if that thought is I'm strong, feeling good, our brains are the most sophisticated filtration system on this planet. My brain is going to filter in everything that agrees with the thought, I'm strong, powerful, strong, feeling good. And it's going to filter out everything that doesn't agree with that thought, which I put there. So by controlling those thoughts, again, law of attraction, I'm going to get more of the same. And I concentrate on just doing that. And I concentrate so much that I don't want my thinking to be disrupted by anything else. So again, control the controllables. In an Ironman, your name is printed on your race number, and it's going to be worn in the front around a race belt.
Yep.
And it's there, Richard. And the spectators are amazing. And it doesn't matter how terrible you look. Hey, Rich, you're looking good, buddy. It's like you're lying. Hey, Rich, you're almost there. It's like, I'm on lap 2 or 4. You know?
But almost.
They're amazing. But you feel like you want to reward them. And you want to, oh, thanks very much, high five. But every time I do that, I'm switching my concentration, the things that I can control, to somebody else, to something else. And I've got to work harder to bring it back and be in the moment. And that's the power of now. The now. This is the one. This is the only thing I can control right now. So what I do is I flip over my race number and I tuck it in so people can't read my name. And that way I'm looking at the ground about 5 meters in front of me. I'm focusing on that thing. I'm trying to block everything else out. And I'm strong, feeling good, strong, powerful. I'm concentrating on this, just this next footstep. And if I can do that, I can
step
do
by
one
step.
more.
Step by step, as you say, stroke by stroke.
That's what it is.
Richard.
So that's leadership of self.
It's been an absolute privilege talking to you. And this is an inspirational story where there's so much. And I hope that we'll get so much feedback from listeners as well. I'm also hoping that you'll come back and share some more on the Leadership Enigma in a few months' time as well. The world is going through a crazy place. But this feels, in some ways, I've got a couple of questions for you, which I haven't told you about, which I always ask people towards the end. I know you're thinking of what could happen now. The first question may actually be redundant because I say to people, what's your favorite hobby? Now, everyone might be thinking, well, it's going to be Ironman, but it might not be. So what is your favorite hobby? It could be a component of an Ironman. I don't know, but...
Wow. So right now, and it changes. So I've painted quite a lot of my life. Pictures you see behind me, that's me writing aloud, being creative. But right now, my favorite hobby is we've got 2 Australian shepherds. One is 4.5 months old. And that's my favorite hobby right now. A lot of time taken up with the training and the dogs. And I'm just loving the energy that comes back from the amazing dogs.
That's very cool. I love that. I'm a dog owner and dog lover myself, so I'm with you on that. So also, you said you were an author of a book, so you might like this question. What's your favorite word? Your favorite word?
Rad.
Rad?
Bad. So I've got an identity arm. And I went through cancer, a lot of identity struggles with self. Who are you? We spend our lives trying to become everything the world demands of us, our parents, etc., who you need to be to attract your spouse, your partner, your job. And we become all these things. And then when somebody tells you you've got 6 months to live, all of a sudden you don't need to be any of that stuff anymore. You can be the most authentic version of yourself.
Yeah.
But then this little existential crisis develops. Well, who the hell am I then? So I started an identity arm. I am.
Now you're pointing to your arm. There's a number of tattoos on your right arm.
I am, and then a whole bunch of words, and then rad is there, and it's R with a dot and an A with a dot and a D with a dot, and it comes from my daughters, and it's from them. It's radically awesome, Dad.
Oh, this is
rad. But a lot of my life, I'm a radical optimist, and being a radical optimist, I think I'm radical to everything. Radical is my favorite word. There's no point in being, I didn't survive cancer just to survive cancer. Radical, Ironman radical, speaking radical, radical. There's no point in doing something unless you're doing it to the most rad.
Brilliant. And my last and final question to you, and this is perhaps very poignant in the context of the story you've told, is I've always asked the question, what would be your best advice to a 21-year-old Richard?
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that question. So I wish I speak a lot at schools and I speak to young people and talk about identity. And my life has been, and this is probably haven't even got into, I've spent a life struggling, low self-esteem. And I think that's part of what the Ironman is for me. I was bullied a lot at school, teased, bullied, and I was a wimp and a crybaby. And I think the Ironman as well, if I can do that. I'm not a wimp and a crybaby. If I can do that, brain cancer is not going to get me. So I think it would be identity. Is how do you? It would be. So I like to do workshops at schools where I give the kids a T-shirt and they get to do the I am tattoo on a T-shirt. So I am. Who are you? It's who are you? What is your why? And I wish I could go back to being 21 and having those discussions with somebody, and to figure out me and the confidence to be authentic and to believe that I am enough. So my advice to any 21-year-old is go on that journey of self-discovery. There's that leadership of self, and then discover that you are just amazingly enough. And who are you, and what makes you authentic? That journey is what I would advise. That's more important. And right now, I know when you're listening to this, we're hopefully on the other side of COVID-19, but in lockdown, and in schools, I'm homeschooling my kids. What I'm saying is, out of all the subjects that I'm helping them with, the subjects I don't see are emotional intelligence. It's not there. And leadership of self, it's not there. And yet those are subjects that we actually should be encouraging.
So important, yeah.
Distinctions in. Because the other subjects, none of those matter as much as that does. And that is worth more. It's been worth more in my journey than anything else I could possibly have studied. So when you're 21, go and study that stuff.
Richard, again, brilliant. Thank you. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of wonderful work with those school-age children as well in what you just described. So this has been a pleasure, a privilege. I hope that you and I will meet in person soon when we can actually get on planes. And I hope you'll come back to us as well, and we can have another conversation. As I say, we'll probably be post-COVID-19 at that point, whatever the world might look and feel like. But it's been absolutely extremely kind of you to spend so much time with us today on the Leadership Enigma. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. What an absolute pleasure. I absolutely would love to be back. And also, I can't wait to meet you in the flesh. And thank you for hosting me. What a privilege. Thank you.
Join us again next week for more tips and strategies on the Leadership Enigma. We'd love to hear your comments on today's show, as well as suggestions for future topics and guests. Get in touch with your host on LinkedIn or visit the dedicated website, www.leadersenigma.com, powered by Transform Performance International, where you can access our exclusive learning, including books, videos, bonus content, assessments, and more. Please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on all your major podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.